For the benefit of the court, can you indicate your qualifications and experience?
My academic qualifications are that I have a bachelor's degree, Bachelor of Arts degree, double majoring in psychology from the University of Melbourne. I have a Bachelor of Law from the Monash University. I have a Master of Arts and PhD in psychology from the University of Toronto. I have a postdoctoral fellow, been a postdoctoral fellow at Yale University. I have held academic posts at various tertiary institutions throughout Australia. I have, over the last 40 years, conducted considerable research in relation to the interviewing of witnesses and people's memory, and particularly looking at assessing the accuracy of what people recall. Accuracy, of course, is determined on the basis of whether a person has recall difficulties or whether, in fact, they are fabricating or lying about the matter. I've conducted research in that area for over the last 40 years.
What is your current position and academic responsibilities?
My current position at Deakin University is Professor of Psychology at Deakin University, and I coordinate the Forensic Psychology program. That is a postgraduate program, a doctoral program in that institution.
Can you explain what factors enable people to discriminate between those who are lying and those who are telling the truth?
There are three general categories or ways people have used to try and discriminate between those people who are lying and those people who are not. The first type of category is to do with psychophysical reactions. The second is to do with non-verbal behaviour or paraverbal behaviour, such as demeanour. And the third is the content of what they say. Now, they are the three broad categories. The problem with the first category, the psychophysical ones, is that they are easy to fake, and also that it's been demonstrated in quite a lot of research by particularly people like Lycan and Furedy from University of Toronto, that there's a very high false positive rate in those techniques. The second type of techniques, the demeanour and paraverbal, once again they are subject to quite a lot of error rates. The third one has to do with the content of what the person says and how they say it. Now, DePaula and her associates list a number of things that they have found to be more reliable than others, and in essence they are, and starting from what I think are the important things, the content of what a person is saying, because what they have shown, and what a number of other researchers such as Johnson and Lindsay have shown, is that if someone is making up something or lying about it, the detail they're able to provide is much less. It's quite impoverished for perceptual details and quite impoverished for contextual details. In addition to that, DePaula has identified the type of speech, namely that when someone is lying, they tend to be more high-pitched in their response than when they're not lying. Some of the non-verbal aspects that she has identified are to do with gesticulation by the hands and by the feet, and she has used that, people have used that as a means of identifying whether someone's lying. And finally, in terms of content, the plausibility of what a person says has been identified as one of the ways in which one can identify someone who's lying. That is, the less plausible the story, the more likely it is that someone is lying. Now, in addition to that, I would add that a person who is lying is less likely to admit that they have made a mistake, that their memory is in error. So those are the sorts of characteristics that people use to identify somebody who may be in fact lying about a particular event that's occurred.
Professor Thompson, are you saying that if someone moves their hands and feet, they're likely to be lying?
No, what I'm saying is that the reverse in fact, that the less they move their hands and feet, the more they are likely to be lying. Because the reason for that is that they're concentrating on their story that they are constructing.
What about shifty eyes, not looking at the questioner? Is that an indication of lying?
There's a whole range of behaviours that commonly are accepted as lying which have been shown to have no substance at all, and that ranges from shifty eyes, ranging from averting gaze. There's very much a cultural thing, the averting gaze aspect, through to such things as having legs crossed. None of those have been shown to be accurate predictors of lying.
So is it fair to say that there's no such thing as Pinocchio's nose?
There is not. Although those ideas are commonly held, they have no support, no empirical support for them at all.
Considering the three main methods of detecting lying you've referred to, does it increase accuracy in detecting lying if you know the person?
The difficulty when it is a stranger is that you've got no baseline on which to compare whether you're looking at the intensity of voice. You don't know whether that person normally speaks in that fashion or not. You don't know with any of their non-verbal behaviour as to whether or not they actually gesticulate. I'm a person who actually gesticulates quite a bit. So unless you have that as a background to base whether the person is behaving differently from what they normally do, it is very difficult then to determine whether someone is lying. Likewise, in terms of the plausibility or content of the story, you don't know whether someone is just a person who is a laconic person who has a person of few words, or the person, in this case, has little to say, even though they normally have quite an extensive range of in their description of things. So you really need to know more about the individual who you are assessing and compare their behaviour now as against their behaviour in circumstances where you can be convinced you know that they're not lying. The example I would use is that I know when my children are lying. Why? Because I've had their lifetime of experience of knowing how they react to when I ask a question. But unless I have that, many of these cues that people have identified as cues to lying are very difficult to implement.
If you were forced to make a list of cues to lying, could you identify the 5 most important?
Well, the 5 most important cues, as far as I'm concerned in my research, is the first one has to do with the content, particularly the capacity of somebody to actually describe and be able to describe their affect at the time an event occurred, to describe their thoughts, to describe the thoughts of if there was a victim there, how the victim might have responded. It is also important, in my view, for people to be able to contextualise what it is that they are talking about, what it is they've seen. Because while context may often be seen as irrelevant, it provides the substance of understanding events that are out of the witness's control, and if they are able to describe what appears to be irrelevant events, then that gives, I think, credibility to their story. A person who's lying will tend to, it will be impoverished to the extent that they will be able to tell the gist of what they want to do, but they have been unable to provide that context. So those aspects to me are the most important. The aspects in terms of a person when they're asked questions and lying, in terms of their speech, that it is the person, when they're lying, tends to be slower. It's probably important, that is, they have more pauses in what they're saying, but there again is, you still need that baseline upon which to judge that. Likewise with the intensity of the voice. So in order of priority, I'd be saying that the content of the story that the witness is presenting is probably the most important one in assessing whether they are lying. Thereafter, I would be looking very closely at whether they pause, or the frequency of pauses in their responses, and the intensity of their voice.
Members of the jury, you have heard the various evidence in this case. While the weight that you give to the views is of course a matter for you, I'm going to talk to you in a general sense about the weight that may be given to the evidence. You should consider the demeanour of the witness, in addition to what they had to say in response to the questions asked of them. That is, you should consider the way and the manner in which the witness gave evidence in addition to what they said. I now isolate and identify for your benefit the following matters of significance, particularly with regards to demeanour, which the courts generally recognise. Liars tend to speak in a higher pitch relative to their normal speaking voice when they are not telling the truth. Liars make fewer movements with their hands, arms and fingers. Liars use fewer illustrators, hand and arm movements, to demonstrate and illustrate points they are making. Liars take longer pauses. Liars' answers are less plausible, and liars' stories contain fewer details. Liars give more indirect answers, and liars' answers contain less temporal, perceptual and spatial information. The presence or absence of some or all of these factors might reasonably, depending of course on your own view, be regarded as undermining the reliability of the evidence of the witness.